first online lesson for English. Now you can see on the screen our two broad outcomes. Under this unit, PNG World Literature, what we did last week for the first time, and now what we are doing, we are towards achieving the second broad outcome, which is for you to read, view, listen to, and respond to a range of complex texts about PNG and beyond to enhance perception. We are going to have a look at what perception is versus perspective later on in this video. Now, before we proceed, since this is only a 30 minutes video, my good people, if I am talking too fast, tell me to slow down. You are all not muted, so you are allowed to speak. Am I talking too fast?
No, miss.
Okay.
No.
Great. So perception of your broadening world, as well as your awareness of your broadening world knowledge. So this lesson title is on point of view. Point of view is an aspect of elements of fiction. Fiction is one of the 5 major genres of literature. You copied that into your workbooks. What are the other 4 major genres of literature? We have drama, we have poetry. What else is there? We have nonfiction as well as prose. So, and fiction makes number 5 on the list. So let's recap the functions of these types of genres. We will not go into each of them in detail, just a brief one. I will prepare worksheets for you and handouts on this. So with fiction and the dramatic genres, they help to learn and improve communication skills. The poetic genre, on the other hand, what does it do? It enhances the imaginative and emotional power of the readers. The non-fictional texts and essays, they help, these ones, they count as prose or some other non-fictions, opposite of fiction. They help readers to develop analytical and persuasive capabilities. However, the major function of genres is to establish a code of behavior between the writer and the audience. This is a fancy way of saying simply creating a relationship between reader as well as the writer. Now, the elements of, what is this? The elements of fiction. We have setting. Of course, you know this. Setting, which is the time. It's not only the physical environment, but as well as the time in which the events occur or take place. Plot, the sequence of events. We have the theme. The theme, the main idea of the message, the insight that the author wants to convey to you. The point of view, this is our lesson now, as well as another aspect of fiction, which is conflict. Conflict, if you refer to your worksheet number 1, extended response, I believe the explanation there is very clear. There are different classical divisions of conflict. One of that can be person versus person, Joe against Joe, or the old man in the pub against himself. What is another division of conflict? We have person versus society, as well as the third division, we have person versus nature, the different classical divisions of conflict. And lastly, person versus the self. If I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down, so I will slow down. Now we are going to practice our...
Take the pen and use the pen on the source.
I'll come to that. We will do a listening activity task now. No, I don't want video.
It's already recording. You cannot stop it. So if you can see yourself here, it's recording.
Okay.
If you stay like this, we are going to see your chest only. That's why you have to stay there, take the pen, and then scroll up.
I'll come to that. Thank you. Who's that? Shut your mouth. Pay attention. What you're going to do, you will listen to this passage that I'm going to read to you now, and you will listen very carefully. If you have some distractions in the background, you try to keep that to a minimal so you listen to this. I'm going to read this to you only once. It's a very short passage, a science fiction text titled Beetle the Artist. So you will listen to this and you'll try to identify the elements of fiction. What are the elements that I'm talking about? The settings and the theme, the time, even the conflict. So you will do that. And I'm going to read for you now. The title of this text is called Beetle the Artist. From a young age, Charlotte Beetle was known throughout Jupiter as an artist of great talent. Art was his life, and he lived only to create. When he was just past middle age and still at the height of his artistic powers, a military coup occurred on the planet. What planet was it? Jupiter. The new emperor soon proved himself to be a ruthless dictator. He had plans to take over the entire galaxy by the year 4025. As part of his vision for Jupiter, the emperor tore down hundreds of structures and had them rebuilt at great expense to celebrate himself. These palaces were to be filled with beautiful frescoes and murals. The emperor invited 3 of the greatest artists on the planet to discuss the planned artwork with him. He would then choose the artists and the plans he liked best. Of course, Beetle was one of the invited artists. He hated the new emperor and all that he represented. But the buildings were to be beautiful and extraordinary. Beetle struggled with his conscience, but in the end, he submitted a proposal and he was selected to paint the palaces. Beetle soothed his qualms with the thought that, after all, he was an artist. What were interplanetary politics to him? When both he and his dictator were dead and gone, Beetle's art in these magnificent structures would remain, exquisite and immortal. Pay attention to the underlined and to some of the words that I've highlighted or bolded for you. Take note of them. He began to work on the first post immediately. His brain teemed with the idea and he threw himself into the work. But every day, the emperor or one of his people was there watching Beetle work and redirecting him. Not like this, they would say, like this. When Beetle complained of the interference, the emperor's eyes narrowed. You work for me, he reminded the artist. You paint what I want. Slowly, Beetle's vision for the frescoes and murals began to be corrupted. He was unable to proceed as he wished. The emperor and his courtiers had no artistic talent, but he could not ignore their demands. In the end, the frescoes were lackluster and lifeless, the murals uninspired. The emperor, however, he was smug with delight. He thought that the art was glorious, and he congratulated Beetle. From that time on, Beetle became the emperor's pet artist, painting sleek court portraits and other works as required by the emperor. In galactic year 6012, that's about 1,995 years later, when the emperor and the artist were long dead, Beetle's early artwork was discovered and revealed. Though the man himself, the man who was Beetle, he was always spoken of as one who had willingly collaborated with a tyrant. So this is your text. I want you to take note of these questions, only 3 short questions. If you can screenshot these questions, you do so. Otherwise, you have 1 minute to just look at them. We'll do them together and observe them so you have a fair idea of what to write also or what to say in your response. So the first one, recount. You know what a recount is. You've done recounts all throughout the term, last term, term 1. Question number 2, the central conflict. If you refer back to the handout which I gave or created the questions on Black Harvest, the docu-series that you watched, documentary film, the central conflict. There can be one major conflict as well as a central or a sub-conflict supporting the central conflict of the story. And number 3 is the theme. I'm particularly interested in questions number 2 and number 3. Number 1, we can go through that another time. In the second worksheet that I will prepare for you, you will write your response in there for me. For now, let's do the corrections to questions 2 and questions number 3. What do you think the central conflict is? What category would you classify this conflict? Heather, thank you for joining us. Tell us the answer.
I think
No?
no, wait.
All right, let's see. Is it person versus society? Is it person versus person? Is it person versus self? What category would we classify this, this conflict?
Person.
Yes?
You said person versus self.
Yes, it's person versus self. Someone was listening. Thank you. That's Alia responding, okay? We have person versus self. What about person versus society? What was it about or the people in that galaxy that, if you listen carefully in the last section, they thought of him as someone who always followed the tyrant leader. But your answer is correct. Your division is correct. It's mostly person versus self. What land use tells us that it was person versus self? That he had a conflict with this. I should erase it first. All right, anyway, let's move on to the next one. So that conflict is indeed correct, person versus self. He had a debate with his own conscience as to whether I should work for this tyrant emperor or not. So he had a long debate with himself on that. Number 3, what is the theme? What words? Now, mind you, guys and girls, with themes don't necessarily have to be long sentences. They can be one word or a phrase simply. So what word or words can you think of with the themes? With what the theme might be? Let's have one word from you. No one? All right. No one wants to guess? There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer here. The theme, you know, is the insight, the moral, the idea, what the author wants to tell you about the character's actions. It is revealed through the character's actions. That is our theme. So what can we say is the theme here?
Character.
He was? He loved to paint. He did not like the emperor, but he stayed on. Now, if he had a choice, he would have up and left the emperor. But because the emperor was a dictator, he was ruthless, he was a tyrant. So who knows, perhaps maybe he thought his life was at risk. If he had just gotten up and left, then maybe something would have happened to him. We don't know. What do you think? If you have a word such as suppression, think of the word suppression and try to make it make sense within the context of the story. Also, the word identity.
Identity. What do you mean?
All right, let's look at the word identity. Now, the word identity is our theme. Would someone like to explain to us what the word means? Within the context, why is this word the appropriate theme for this short text? Identity.
It defines who you are.
Loxley, it does. It defines who you are, okay?
All the types of words.
Good. Anyone else? But what is it that defines who you are? What was it about the character that made them, the people,
I think
define?
it's what you do.
Yes, what you
I think
do.
What you do that, yeah, defines. I mean, it's part of you. So it's like your identity.
Exactly.
What?
What you do defines your identity. Now, observe the text here. You notice the things, the words that I put in bold, as well as some of the phrases I've underlined for you. These are all hints. These are what the author or the writer uses to hint to you. This is what is called implicit meaning. So if you're reading between the lines, critical reading, now you are reading, looking at the word choices that are being used in the text to give us hints as to the meaning of the text or what it is that needs to be taken out, derived from the passage. We have some words which are repeated, a lot of them actually. We have words such as artist, words such as, what's another word? Frescoes or murals, art, works. These are all words which are repeated in the text, and they're not just random words used to fill up space or make number. No, they have meaning. There is a purpose behind this. This is what is referred or what is called motive. When you are trying to find the meaning of the meaning or theme of a passage, the word is motive. Motive means looking out for repeated words. It's not the same as, what's another word? What's the word that I'm referring to?
Motive.
They are not the same thing. Motive is the action that drives you to do something. Motive are the choices or the selection of words that are used in the text to set hints so that you as the reader can try to decipher the meaning of what it is that's going to be said to you. So the example we have there with all of those words, the highlighted, the underlined, the bolded, all of those, they're called motive. When you are reading, you pay very close attention to what word or phrases which are being repeated often. These words, they give you a hint to what the theme is. So looking at all of this represents something physical, something that is done, yeah? It's work, it's art, so identity. Now we can put it in a sentence or put it in a nice phrase to say that this is the theme. How will you explain this? Identity. Your identity is in the art, or you are identified by your actions. These are all physical actions. Any questions before we move on?
No, you can move on.
All right, I speak it for everyone. Make use of the chat. Please write a question in the chat box. Okay. All right, we are moving on to looking at point of view. You know what point of view is. Point of view is who is telling the story, yeah? So when the story is written in the first person, you know that the character is inside the story. The short text which you read from John Kasipalova, Bitonaris Bad Magic. This is an example, or Sir Albert Marikiki. If you observe in your textbook, page 208, we haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but it is being prepared in your next worksheet. So you're going to read this extract from Sir Albert Marikiki. You will read that. Those are examples of first person. Now, second person is not very common. It's not very popular. With the third person, the narrator is an outsider to the story who reports the events of the story to the reader. They refer to the characters either by name or by pronouns. And you read the text of Ernest Hemingway, A Clean Lighted Place. Yes? And lastly, this point of view is not very common. It's called the third person omniscient. When one is omniscient or omnipresent, that means someone who is all-knowing. Usually this word is connotated with religion or spirituality to refer to the God or whatever, the higher deity or the power, higher source. So the third person omniscient. Examples of this can be in biographies or news articles. We haven't had a chance to read Nora Vagibash, but we are going to, how do I get rid of this? Do that, fill that in with our worksheet number 3. So that is that on third person. Any comments? Please make use of the chat box on the side. Send me a message right now. Now there is, yes? No one is talking, okay. I want you to look at perspective and perception. Now, in your responses, I observed that some of you, there was a very big split in your responses to all of the task questions. Some people submitted their worksheets, and therefore, what better way to touch on perspective and perception now that we are looking at points of view? So with perspective, what is it? It is simply a point of view. It is my point of view of something. Perception, on the other hand, is the interpretation one gives through his own awareness. My background, my perception or my perspective, my point of view is influenced by my background and my own upbringing and all of those. So that is what perception means, the interpretation that I personally give to something. It's a way of understanding and gaining insight. Yes, so I want you to think of the key difference between the two terms is that it is the different perspectives that help us create our perceptions. It's not perceptions which create our perspective, but the different perspectives which help us to create our perceptions. Now think to the character or the conflict in Black Harvest documentary that you viewed. I asked this question several times, not many people answered. Who was in the wrong in the picture, the visual text? Was it the lead character, Jolay? Was it Popinamai, his guardian or the old man? Or was it the entire tribe's people? Whatever you say, your response to this question, it's influenced by your background or your own personal awareness, what you know, what you do not know, and what others have influenced you to say what you are saying. Why do you think Jolay, why do you think he left his family back in Port Moresby and returned to Mount Hagen? When he, in fact, he himself refers to himself as a Haganah, as a tribesman, as a big man in the village. Why did he leave his family and go back to Hagen if he was a big man in his tribe? Why did he not feel that he belonged to his people or with his people? What was that conflict that he had? He had so many conflicts, and most often conflicts can interplay. It cannot be just one classical division of conflict. It can always be 2 or 3 different conflicts that all of them that unfold within the same story at the same time. So for Black Harvest, we know that it was person versus society, person versus person, it was person versus self, all of those conflicts. There's several themes in that film, in that narrative, and I'm looking forward to reading your responses full time. And what adjective you choose to describe Popinamai, the old man, the guardian of Jolei, what words you choose to describe him, it tells us, gives a reflection of your awareness of Popinamai's cultural backgrounds, your own background as to how educated you are on him as a person, his culture. So it's all part of perception. Every perception a person has is based upon their own personal experience. People perceive it because no two people have the same experiences. And these experiences, they make us who we are. It shapes our minds and our opinions, our lives. It's difficult to have one ideal definition of certain concepts, such as justice, virtue, and even an ideal society, or even beauty, for example. Now, please switch off your music. We have 5 more minutes, so we can just touch on this briefly. Otherwise, it will be prepared on your worksheet, so it's fine. I'm going to show you now an image, and you will have 2 minutes only. This image, in this image, there are 7 pictures. You are going to pick out those pictures, but you will not utter them. You will not say it out loud what images you have identified in this next picture. You just keep them to yourself until when I ask you, then you can say what it is that you see. But bear in mind that there are 7 pictures within this image. So everyone focus on your screen and observe. You have 2 minutes only to look at this and tell me how many, not tell me, you just take note.